people who can't comprehend the Second Amendment, and gentlemen. Lately I've ran into a lot of libtards here on YouTube who justify their opposition to the Second Amendment with assault weapon bans and defend various Democrats like Tom Dungheap, Harkin, Feinstein, and Hussein Obama because they're only against assault weapon bans, which is not true anyways. Unfortunately for them, assault weapon bans are just plain silly. Andrew Traver, Hussein Obama's nominee to head the ATF, justifies assault weapon bans with comments such as, "These weapons are extremely powerful. The power and randomness of the heavy caliber military style," that's a key word, "weapons make them so dangerous not only to people but to police." They throw on the phrase assault weapon as a catchphrase, and as all liberals do, they regurgitate it every chance they get. "I'm only against assault weapons," the limp-wristed Democrat explains. The list of problems with Mr. Traver's claims is very long. If he really believes that these weapons fire unacceptably heavy caliber bullets, he's going to have to ban virtually all rifles. Small game rifles, guns designed to kill squirrels and rabbits without destroying too much meat, typically fire .22 caliber bullets, which is similar to that used in the M16, which has been used since Vietnam, and newer M4 carbine rifles used in Afghanistan and Iraq. Deer hunting rifles fire rounds that are similar to those used in the AK-47. Speaking of M16s, M4s, and AK-47s, Traver is correct when he states that the guns covered by the federal assault weapons ban were military-style weapons, but he fails to note that this really just deals with style, the cosmetics of the guns, but not how they actually operate. The guns covered by the ban were not the machine guns actually used by the military, but civilian semi-auto versions of those guns. The civilian version of the AK-47 may look like the guns used by militaries around the world, but it is different. It fires essentially the same bullets as deer hunting rifles at the same rapidity, one bullet per pull of the trigger, and does the same damage. On penetrating body armor, Mr. Traver leaves out one important detail. Rifles in general are often able to penetrate body armor simply because their bullets travel faster than those fired from handguns. The same can be said for going through the walls of houses. But if he had said that deer hunting rifles can often penetrate walls and lower level types of body armor, it is unlikely that his comments would have generated the same fear, and that's what he wants, fear and hysteria. Unfortunately, what Mr. Traver has done more than make clearly inaccurate claims about so-called assault weapons. He has supported banning .50 caliber rifles, regulations that would force many gun shows to close down, the Chicago handgun ban, repealing the TART Amendment, which protects sensitive trace data from being misused in frivolous municipal lawsuits against gun makers. We'll get to that later. He also worked with the Joyce Foundation, which has funded gun ban groups such as the Violence Policy Center, on the Gun Violence Reduction Project. Eric Holder has also used similar reasoning in his support for another assault weapons ban. However, the ban would be a revival of a law passed in the early years of the Clinton administration that expired in 2004. The law prohibited the sale of newly manufactured magazines holding more than 10 rounds of ammo and having 2 of 5 cosmetic features on semi-automatic rifles. If you had a pistol grip and a detachable magazine, you couldn't have a bayonet lug. And if you put a bayonet lug on it with a pistol grip and a detachable magazine, ooh, it's become super dangerous then. More recent proposals have attempted to ban barrel shrouds, which the rest of the world calls hand guards, the place you put your hand instead of on a hot barrel to prevent burning it while firing. The emphasis here is on the cosmetic. Any rational discussion of the issue ought to note that an assault weapon is any object you use to assault someone with, and banning the presence of a bayonet lug on the barrel of a rifle is senseless. Knives, tire irons, and bricks can all serve as assault weapons. This is an instance where quotation marks are not just appropriate, they are required. Much of the public support for the law was based on a warping of the issue by gun control wackos to make the public believe that those firearms are machine guns. The fully automatic weapons that gun controllers use to push this agenda have been heavily regulated by the federal government since 1934 and not produced for civilian sale since 1986. Don't take my word for it. Here's Josh Sugarman of the Violence Policy Center. He says, quote, "The weapon's menacing looks, coupled with the public's confusion over fully automatic machine guns, versus semi-automatic assault weapons. Anything that looks like a machine gun is assumed to be a machine gun can only increase the chance of public support for restrictions on those weapons, end quote. Holder and company continue to use this fallacious line of reasoning, attempting to take advantage of the general public's ignorance on guns. Enacting another assault weapons ban won't do anything to curb the use of automatic weapons in Mexico or anywhere else, because those firearms are already illegal here, as well as ammunition specifically designed to pierce through armor. It defies reason to think that multi-billion-dollar criminal syndicates will not be able to get their hands on guns because of an American law banning cosmetic features and dictating lower magazine capacity. If the Mexican government gets better control of its own armaments, the cartels will simply go back to the black market and buy the guns or make them. Guns are handcrafted in the frontier provinces of Pakistan, and there's no reason that the cartels could not do the same in a country with far more industrial know-how. 3 minutes of internet research will reveal plans to make fully automatic submachine guns, so enough capital to set up a machine shop and buy some sheet metal is all it would take. The expired ban did not demonstrably impact crime anyway. The Centers for Disease Control conducted a study in 2003 that found no reduction of crime attributable to the law. This should come as no surprise, since most criminals' weapons of choice are cheap, small-caliber pistols. They traditionally dominate the ATF's top crime list. There are some bad apples out there selling guns to people they know to be straw buyers, people who have clean records, and resell those guns to who don't. Prosecute them. Enforce the existing laws before deciding to restrict the freedom of law-abiding citizens. So folks, if you hear a Democrat blathering about assault weapons, you can rest assured they're getting their data from Eric Holder, Hussein Obama, the Joyce Foundation, or some schmuck at the Brady campaign. Moving on to my next topic, Tom Harkin and Hussein Obama are definitely working to undermine the Second Amendment. Consider the passage of S. 397, Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, on July 29, 2005. This legislation had a simple goal. If Fred goes out and buys a so-called assault weapon or a handgun, passes the background check, and then goes bonkers after a dispute at the local watering hole and kills 3 people, the manufacturer of that firearm cannot be held liable in any way, shape, or form. 31 senators voted against this. 29 of them were Democrats, including luminaries such as Tom Dungheap Harkin, Hussein Obama, Schumer, Biden, and Boxer. If a gun maker makes a semi-automatic weapon and sells it to a gun shop, who then sells it to someone who goes off the deep end a few years later? Why go after the gun maker? Are we going to target Budweiser, McDonald's, or Betty Crocker for fat slobs too? It's called personal responsibility. That vote was certainly a vote to undermine the Second Amendment. My next piece of business concerns an amendment offered by Senator Vitter on July 13, 2006 to a bill funding the Department of Homeland Security. It read as follows and was a response to some people having their guns taken away in the wake of Katrina. None of the funds appropriated by this act may be used to temporarily or permanently seize any firearm during an emergency or major disaster, as those terms are defined in Section 102 of the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act. If the possession of such firearm is not prohibited under federal or state law, other than for forfeiture in compliance with federal or state law, or as evidence in a criminal investigation. It was amended, and then Harkin sent me this BS reply. I supported Senator Vitter's amendment to H.R. 5441 as it was originally introduced, and the amended version will be on your screen. This original version of the amendment would have prevented law-abiding citizens from having guns seized in an emergency, but it would also allowed law enforcement officials to confiscate weapons that were possessed illegally or were used in the commission of a crime. Unfortunately, these protections against criminal activity were removed from the final version of the amendment, end quote. Not true. You can still have your gun seized if you possess it illegally. I see nothing in there that indicates this. Harkin was one of only 16 senators, all Democrats, that opposed this. And in the wake of Katrina, of course, they were taking people's guns and people got pissed. The police can still take your gun if you possess it illegally, but they can't do it just because there's a national emergency. It's especially counterproductive to take guns when that might be the only thing standing between a man and a few gang members. My next piece of business is short and sweet. As usual, I have all the links underneath the video. Hussein Obama had a road to Damascus conversion concerning the D.C. handgun ban. After the Heller decision, he supported the Supreme Court's decision that overturned the unconstitutional handgun ban in D.C., but back in February of 2008, he was in favor of such bans. Go figure. Another method the left utilizes is misinformation concerning all those illegal guns in Mexico. They'll fabricate statistics saying 80% of all illegal guns in Mexico come from the U.S. They use this as a catalyst for gun control, trying to curb illegal gun sales. Again, automatic weapons, grenades, etc. are illegal. The truth is, most guns coming from Mexico are not traced for one reason or another. They get their 80% or more total by simply taking the percentage of all guns that are traced. And if 80% of the guns traced in any given year come from the U.S., they make the giant leap of faith that 80% of all guns in Mexico's drug war can come from the U.S. According to the GAO, the number of guns seized in Mexico that have been traced back to the U.S. has ranged from 5,260 in 2005 to 1,950 in 2006 to 3,060 in 2007 to 6,700 in 2008. That is a total of about 17,000. A libtard might dissent and say, "Prove to me those untraced weapons didn't come from the U.S." Don't ask me to prove a negative, moron. Jess T. Ford, Director of International Affairs and Trade at the GAO, testified before the House Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere on June 19, 2009, and said, "It is impossible to know how many firearms are illegally trafficked into Mexico in a given year." End quote. It is therefore impossible to know what share of those firearms are of U.S. origin. Tracing through U.S. e-trace system is available to Mexican law enforcement, and I have to ask, why aren't they utilizing that more? Interesting indeed. From 2007 to 2008, more than 29,000 firearms and more than 2,000 grenades, I wonder where those came from, were picked up at crime scenes in Mexico. Approximately 38% of the guns seized, 11,000 were submitted to the U.S. for tracing. Of those, approximately 6,000 were successfully traced, and 5,114, less than 18%, were found to come from the U.S. A later report from the Department of Homeland Security indicated that only 3,480 guns could be traced to the United States. So a lot of these aren't even traceable, and a lot of them aren't submitted by the Mexican government. Finally, despite the evil Bush administration allowing the so-called assault weapons ban to expire, violent crime has been declining in this nation. Have a nice day, gun grabbers, and don't thank me now for correcting your stupidity.